making sure everything's set up in case you're catching this live stream. Just wanted you to know what we're doing. Got about 1 minute, and then we're going to start our Ask Vanessa Anything segment, which I'm really excited to share with you today. Let's see. Let's do a little test. YouTube. Looks like we're supposed to be on YouTube and Facebook, our Facebook group. Looks like we're on. Yes, good. We are on the YouTube channel. Hi, everybody. Hope you're there. Hope you're here. Good to see you. Just making sure that everything's running smoothly, and we'll get started in just a moment. So we have a lot of great questions this segment. We're looking at a pretty wide age span as we're thinking about how we can raise more resilient kids while we're raising our own resilience. And as we're doing that, we're having to consider not only our personal goals, our goals for our kids, our family goals, but also their developmental goals. And so something that I want to make sure everybody is thinking about as we're rolling into today's segment is that it's a one-size-fits-all approach for so many reasons. And I'm going to be sort of today whether or not we're also considering their developmental goals. So kind of get ourselves in our frame of mind for these questions. I also want you to have a sense for some of you that be new to you, where these questions are coming from. So folks join our Facebook group called the Raising Our Resilience Parent Group. And we ask them a question: what is the hardest thing that you're dealing with? And also between mastery, setting limits that stick, running smooth routines, what's up for you right now? What's the most important thing that we can help you with? And so that's part of what we're checking out are those questions today. There's also a way that you can submit to www.thecalmempoweredparent.com so that you can check out our latest podcast news and episodes, but also there's a form for you to submit a question. And that's also where we end up having listener questions. All right, so we're going to get us started. Welcome to the Calm Empowered Parent Ask Vanessa Anything segment. We're so glad to have you here and listening and learning alongside the folks who have asked these really interesting, brave, and really important questions. So as I'm getting started, I just want you to consider, in each of these examples, each of these stories, there's always a question for you too. And the reason why I know this to be true is because I've been doing this thing called side door coaching now for, over 5 years, but especially concentrating these last 4 years since the pandemic started. And what it does is it helps us to understand that we're not alone. And I know that, hearing stories that are similar to yours, that's one way you can feel less alone. Spending time in a cohort or in a small group that is focusing on the same topic and maybe going through some of the same struggles, that's how you can feel less alone and have good company in your journey. And those are components, for example, in my year-long program, the Family Foundations Immersion. However, there's this other thing that can happen when you bring a mentor into the mix, which is another component of my program, where you're opening up of our school workshops. Because sure, we can find content kind of anywhere. And you can read books and listen to podcasts, and people keep telling me, Vanessa, I read books, but I just don't know what to actually do with the information. So that's where the Q&A part of the workshop becomes so important. And things like this, ask me anything, ask Vanessa anything. In this case, it happens to be me. So this thing called side door coaching is when you hear a mentor answer questions and you get to sort of listen in on the conversation. And when you get to do that, oftentimes you'll end up having questions that are being asked that you didn't think to ask. And that's actually a good thing, because oftentimes we miss sort of dimensions of possibility, we'll call them, because we are kind of stuck in some patterns or some ways of being or some sort of philosophical sort of frameworks. And when someone asks a question that doesn't like overlaps but isn't exactly the question we would ask from their perspective, it opens up a possibility of something new, that not only is the answer maybe interesting to you, but the question itself could possibly expand your sense of what's relevant when raising children and wanting to raise resilient children. So glad to have you here. Thanks for tuning in. And we're going to get started with the questions. So I'm going to start with Mary's question. Mary asks, how can we change a routine and create healthy boundaries with our 10-year-old who currently has some bad screen habits? So screen habits and 10 years old, see those two, right, coming together. When we want to figure out how to support these kind of tweens, we have to consider how they are, sort of like, well, what their developmental goals are right now and what their sort of developmental readiness is as well. And the reason why is because if we ignore those things, we can often parent too low or too high in compared to their actual developmental age. I'll give you an example. So for those of you who have younger kids, when you're wanting to set up screen time, a lot of times we have to be really clear going into the conversation about the limits and rules and expectations, to the degree where you even know what the consequences might be if they don't follow the rules. You already know the reasons why these expectations exist, and you've practiced how to explain it to a 2, 4, 6, 8-year-old. And when you're heading into 8, this starts to change, but especially under 8, you really have to have your game plan down and ready to rock, like ready to go. And the reason why is because they need that structure in place because they have such limited life experience. There's them perhaps navigating content, understanding, that the routine is boss, things like that. And then within the for the kids who are under very simple that they'll be making, and they're very much more like in the moment choices, things like like building a little mini routine of how we're going to separate from the device when we're done. Yeah. For example, another could be how we're going to spread this across the calendar, right? And it could say like, oh, are we going to do it at 3 or 4, right? Are we going to play outside first and then have screen time, or do screen time first and then play? Like very simple choices within a lot of tight limits. As they get older, kids, their developmental readiness, so this is like Mary's child, around Mary's 10-year-old age, we're going to want to collaborate with them more around what is possible for balancing screen time with other activities. For example, we're going to want to like have the whole week calendar laid out, and maybe even look at like shading in blocks of time to talk to them about things like media hygiene, because we might start taking off some of the parental controls and like letting them explore a little wider. And they might even start doing some online gaming with friends. And that's something that between the ages of 10 and 13, you're going to have to address, because it's such a, and you'll also need to do a few things around getting into their world about what kind of content they like, even more so than with little kids. And the reason why there can be a lot of their parents. One of the worst things you can do when you are trying to parent a tween or teen is not take the time to get into their world and really understand why they find this activity valuable, whether it's a TV show, looking at like watching somebody playing games or actually playing a game online, or whatever it is that they're using their devices for. Because the worst thing you can hear from a teen or tween is you don't get it. And then that's incredibly discouraging. Their experience of you is discouraging. And then it can kind of shut things down, because partner. And I'm not probably going to even be willing to have a conversation with you about this until I get a sense that you do understand and get why I value this show, this game, this streaming service, whatever it is that they're really interested in, a social media service. So there's all of those things. And then because what a lot of parents do is they do it backwards. What they'll do is they'll come in with a teen and tween saying, like coming strong with coming kind of hot, right? Think of like landing an airplane, you're coming in too hot. And of course, like everybody at the, airport and the runway's like, it's too much, right? And it can kind of like, kind of start going like, mayday, mayday, let's slow this down. Well, the teens and tweens, their nervous systems can do that. They'll flash an alarm and just be really resistant. So what we'll want to do is instead of coming in hot by saying things like, it's media so addictive, and there's valid points here, by the way. Social media so addictive. You spend too much time on the screens. And start saying things like, why don't you spend more time outside? What happened to your Legos, or whatever it might be? Already the kid is going to be feeling this like pushing power struggle. And we really want to avoid that as much as possible if we're going to establish kind of like a copacetic collaborative thought partnership about how screens are going to be used and when and how much and what content, et cetera, and helping that they have their own navigation system for what choices they're going to make around screens. So things to avoid would be coming in with that sort of already having a judgment, kind of giving this message of, I know better than you, and you're already messing up and making so many mistakes right now. This is only bad, I think, is the other thing that they hear a lot around screens and device usage. And that just shuts things down. Instead, you work up to that. So how it can go is you spend some time getting into their world about what they like about whatever device they're using and whatever way they're using it, right? And this can take like not days, but weeks. And try to find at least one thing you get or like or can appreciate about the things that they value. And ask questions, like, oh, what do you think is going to happen next in the show? Or why does that character keep doing that? Or wait, what level are you on right now? How long have you been playing this? Wow, okay. What are the harder levels like, about a game? Like, get interested, genuinely find a way to be interested. And think of this as a way of like just getting to know your kid and bonding with them, getting some insight into, the person they're becoming and the kind of, dynamics they're interested in, whether it's like funny or dramatic or, high stakes or relaxing, right? So get into their world and show some understanding, some feelings around like what's going right here, yeah? And then you can start to share your own feelings and perspective. Notice that we can't skip to this step and start with that, right? It doesn't quite work. So then you can start to say things like, well, I've been hearing all these things about media being addictive. I also have my own experience with it. What do you think? And I have some concerns about like the fact that, I'm looking at your device, you're on the screen like 2 hours a day. That seems like a lot. Can we talk about that? And then you start to get into the nuances of what type of screen time are we even describing here? Are we talking about educational screen time, passive, active, social, right? Entertainment. There's a lot of ways to describe screen time. And it could be that there are different allocations for different types, which I've been guiding a lot of families with teens and tweens towards, because it's more nuanced and the kids appreciate that. And it's also feels more fair. And then the other side of it is, what can we do to make things that are not screens more enticing? And could we dust off those board games? Can we bring out those puzzles? Can we get maybe refresh our equipment for a certain sport so now your gear fits again? Can we build in a time where we just physically go somewhere and we don't bring our devices? And I also model that I'm not on my phone while we're on the soccer field with the ball, for example, right? Just bring sunscreen instead. So there's a lot of pieces you can play with here. But where you want to end up is being able to have like a weekly or bi-weekly, every 2-week check-in around how is screen time going, what's working, what's not working, are we sticking to our agreements, why aren't we sticking to our agreements if we're not, Do we need to build in consequences here to keep ourselves accountable? Are there any other mechanisms or systems we can put in place? For example, for a period of time in my household, we, with my stepchildren and my now ex, their father, we did have our daughter and our stepson eventually put their devices in the kitchen at a certain time at night. And it was actually really helpful to them, but especially I remember for my daughter, because this was something we came up with semi together. She said, it would actually be helpful if you gave me a device curfew, because I do have a friend who's really pressuring me too much to be available in the middle of the night when she's upset. And then she gets mad if I don't answer her texts at like midnight and 1 a.m. And I'd really like to be able to just rest and have a good night's sleep. And I remember this conversation so vividly because it was like she was turning a corner, realizing how important it was for her to be unavailable by device for certain hours of the day, and that she could be empowered to protect those, but that it was also helpful socially for her to say it was to blame it on her parents as a first step. So instead of saying, well, no, I'm not sympathetic enough. I need sleep. So my sleep is more important than our friendship, is sort of what she was feeling. And instead she was able to say, my dad says makes me put my phone in the kitchen at night, so I won't be able to respond after this text, right? And those boundaries were really important for her to be able to establish, and we were able to participate in that. And the fact that we got there was really significant. And yeah, it took time. And the process I'm suggesting can look like, something you roll out over 2-3 months. And by the end of the 3 months, you're actually having these weekly or biweekly conversations where you check in. In my world, we do a lot of family meetings. And that's really important, so that you can have the opportunity to have like a structured time to be able to come back and check in and say, how is it going? Is this working for us? And also to do a lot of other things that family meetings can function for. All right. So it's a long answer, but an important one, because it kind of lays out steps that can help all of us for all kinds of things get on the same page as a family. And I know that's one of the bigger goals that I keep hearing from families. I've had for example, over 500 people take my quiz, and getting on the same page as a family is often one that people rank as one of the things that they really want in the near future. And even in their anecdotal answers, it's like, I just really want to feel like a team. And so hopefully this process that I've laid out for you today will be supportive of that and bring you closer to that feeling and that goal. For me personally, that's when I feel like our family's in a flow state. And I'm in a flow state with significant others and important people in my life, is where we're collaborating towards goals together. And we're doing it in a way where we're allowed to say, hey, I think something needs to be adjusted here. Let's check in to what do we need to do to, what structures do we need in place? And how can we be supportive? And, in this way, that's not just, hey, yes to everything. But it's also not, so harsh either. Like there's a way forward that's both firm and kind, that can be supportive. Gianni's here. Hi, Gianni. Glad you're here. Sorry about the delay in the webinar starting on Zoom. That was something I just caught, so I'm glad you're able to join us. I'm going to come back to the questions now. So that was Mary's question, and Mary, thank you for asking it. It's so valuable, and I know a lot of people want help with screen time. And so this is really relevant, and I'm really glad you asked. All right. So then when we are moving on to this next question, what I want you to have in mind is that there is a lot to juggle as a parent, but especially when you have multiple kids or you're a single parent, or you have high work demands. I have some families that I mentor where one of the parents travels a lot, and they have to kind of come up with routine version A, routine version B, or depending on which parent's there. And we do a lot of strategizing around that sort of thing. So the next two questions are related to that. And I'm going to start with Amina and Andrew kind of had a similar question. So we put them together. And in these questions, what I noticed is that, a lot of times we think of it as managing like managing our time, managing our day, managing and juggling things like I just mentioned, like things like work and school, and then the kids' homework and the kids commuting, and then meal times and bedtimes, and still get to have some even meaningful one-on-one time with your kids. So there's a few things that I want to bring up here. First of all, one of the things that kids can really grow into is taking more and more responsibility for their own routines. And it's often something that we make attempts at, but we don't see all the way through. And this is part of why in my Family Foundations Immersion program, the first module of every semester starts with routines. And we talk about how we can create these like robust routines that practically run themselves, how to really get the kids' input and get them kind of invested in the outcomes of these routines so that parents can shift out of managing mode into connection and a teamwork mode, and even have time for themselves. And they have like some downtime built into the routines where you're not just spending, it can be like 15 hours or 20 hours a week with your family, just moving through routines. So if you think about like, let's say Monday through Friday, an hour in the morning, maybe 3 hours in the evening, that's 4 hours times 5, 20 hours of your day could be actually in routine. So let's make them better. Couple of thoughts about this. So the getting the kids involved in being able to take more ownership. And I'll give you like one of the key steps that you have to start with. First, you have to acknowledge and name that you have a routine. And you can break it into parts, right? Like morning routine, afternoon routine, evening routine, bedtime routine. And that's maybe sounds really rudimentary, but it's actually like really important, because then when you say, oh, it's time for us to start the morning routine, we have a common language for what that is. And then you need to build a comprehensive mutual understanding of what I mean when I say morning routine. When I say morning routine, am I including only the things that need to get done, or am I talking about the whole thing? And also drilling down into the details, like how much time do we have for this? Whose job is it? Is this something that I'm there to support you, or I expect you to do on your own? Is this something that only I do? And you can lay this all out as a family. And I actually walk my clients through this for a reason, because when you can build a robust routine where the kids are involved, they're so much more likely to do it from this intrinsic motivation of like, I have competence, I'm interested in the goal, and I have choices built in, I've given my input, this is mine too. And at the end of it, I get to have something I want, maybe like more Lego time, if that's their thing, or more crafting time was really important to one family. Another was some special time to like connect before you set out to the day and do something like take the dog for a walk together, is what one of my clients does, or read a couple books, or do one piece of the routine together, or maybe you pack the lunch together and talk about your day. It can look different for each family, but having that connection point where it's not just moving through the routine can be so wildly fulfilling and set the tone for the rest of the routines and the rest of the day. So I would encourage you to consider like taking the time to then save time and then build more quality time together. Last tip I have about juggling things is that I think that we do have sometimes a stark like kind of mode switch where it's like either we're just chilling and nothing's getting done and it's fun and it's free time and it's relaxed, or we're like on task, moving through the routine as quickly and efficiently and effectively as possible. And that transition between those two things is where a lot of parents meet resistance. And so what I would say is like, is there a way to sprinkle in more of that like relaxed, fun, connected, and more empowered time within the routine? For example, could you make some of the transitions from one part of the routine to another fun, and like have your own little special way that you do it as a family that kind of grows up with the kids, right? Like maybe you'll start with, hey, we're going to get from like the kitchen living room area with my 4-year-old into the bedroom, which she's been resisting lately because that's like the beginning of the end of the fun time. We're going to make that part fun. And then we're also going to do at least one little fun thing, like in the bathroom as soon as she finishes brushing her teeth. Then we're going to do one more little fun thing when we tuck her in, and like build it in. And then that might age up to an 8-year-old looking forward to hearing you read aloud another chapter of a great, fun, interesting series, like with a mystery or science fiction or mythology, like Percy Jackson and the Olympians, or maybe even if they're ready, you know, when they hit like 9, 10, start reading some Tolkien to them, Lord of the Rings, and other really rich texts. So maybe they're looking forward to that, and that's built in. So it's like, okay, let's get our stuff done. Oh, I can't wait. And like while you're getting ready, you can talk about, I wonder what happens next. So yeah, what happened last time? And it just suddenly you're just moving through it. Like life becomes special and connected and good. And yeah, and sometimes you do go like, let's go get our stuff done and like, you know, meet back in the bedroom, you know, to start reading in 10 minutes, right? Set a timer and you can like 5 minutes in, I'm almost there. How are you doing? Yeah, I'm almost there. So that feeling of like, we're moving forward together. Again, which I mentioned earlier in the earlier question, but it's like this theme that runs through even trying to juggle everything. So I'll tell you, like, fixing your routine so that they're robust, they're running smoothly, practically running themselves is the fastest path to having more ease and enjoyment in daily family life. And I really stand behind that. And that's why I love teaching this. And it's something I really like helping parents with, because there's so much within our routine, our 20 hours a week, usually in the weekdays only, you know, alone, where we get to improve things as a family. So please, yeah, consider going through, even if it's not my process, like finding a mentor and working through your routine steps so that you get to a place where the kids are really on board and helping you run them. It's so worthwhile. And you can imagine myself, I mean, I was a teacher for preschoolers and later elementary, and then raising my own teens and tweens. If our routines were off, it was like if you could feel it so quickly, and the effects would accumulate to the stress and this tension in our relationship very quickly. It would accelerate sort of over just a series of days. And the opposite was true. When our routines were running well, oh, it just felt so good. We're like a smoothly running machine in this way that we all know, we're like smoothly running play. Like we all know our parts, we know our roles. Folks who have figured out how they like to do the certain parts of the routine, what order, you know, whether they needed a timer or a checklist or whatever to help them move through it. And it was just, I had some beautiful days, beautiful weeks, even months in the classroom and with my kids where things just ran so smoothly. And then there's like space, like mental space for juggling all the other things like meal planning and homework and all the other things that were mentioned in the question. So please consider, yes, taking some time to tackle those routines. And you can do it over 4, 6, 8, maybe up to 12 weeks. I have my clients work on it for the first 4 weeks of their program, but then we continue chipping away at it for the whole semester, and then revisit it more deeply the top of the next semester. Every semester starts through, you know, January and July, which are great times to like revisit our routines. Okay. All right, I have, let's see, next one I want to talk about is fostering the best skills for lifelong habits, because it really is sort of like the next stage of what I just talked about. So let me read the question a second here, get it up on Facebook and make sure I tag the people too. All right, this is Lauren's question. Lauren's a new member of the Facebook group. She asks, how do I know I'm fostering the best skills for fostering, oh, sorry, let me start that again. Lauren Conley asks, how do I know if I'm fostering the best skills for lifelong habits? Chores, cleaning up, creating routines, etc., when I've never taught children before? I love this question because so many of us who come into the role of parenting and caregiving have little to no experience with children. And I always think it's a bit of an unfair gig and a really challenging setup. Especially because I noticed for myself, it took minimum 3 months working with, let's say, I think 36 kids of all different temperaments from ages like 2.5 to 6.5 to even have a basic idea of like what is happening at that developmental age between, you know, 2 and 6, 2 and 7. And then it took me probably 3 years before I felt really equipped to handle a group of children alone. And so my heart just goes out to every parent who feels like if they have moments that they're just kind of out of their depth, and they will do their best, and that's so admirable, and they'll ask for help, and read things, ask people who have been there before, leaning on peers, or even join a program, work with a mentor, because it's hard to think of another role where the stakes are so high and the outcomes are so important that doesn't have a built-in mentorship program and a cohort and a mentor and a curriculum, and also the grace of like time and space to learn, right? Dedicated time set aside for it. I mean, if you can think of some professions that you just get thrown in the deep end that are as important as raising a human, I'd love to hear what those are. Because imagine, any other thing where like a life depends on you. It's years of training, typically under close supervision with a ton of support, and a lot of investment of time and energy and even money and like effort into your education and your development before you're sort of entrusted, right? So I think parents have a tough hill to climb. So what can I say about being sure that you are on the right track? A few signs you're going to look for is that kids tend to, even if you have to start with what's called extrinsic motivation, which might be what we call like carrots and sticks, or incentive systems, or reward systems, or consequences and punishments. You're going to want to look for kids finding what's called intrinsic motivation and kind of graduating from any extrinsic motivators to more intrinsic motivators. Things like, this makes me feel good. I'm proud of my accomplishments. I'm finding something interesting about this. I feel helpful and I'm happy to help, right? This brings me closer to the people in my life. I see myself as growing, and this is an opportunity for me to learn something new or to get better at something, right? All of those signs, if they're starting to show up across these kind of daily, like the stuff of daily life that she mentioned, right? Chores, things like cleaning up and creating routines, then you're on the right track. Okay, so that's one sign you're going to look for. The other is that your child is able to critically think through problems when they come up. So we've run out of sandwich bags and we're supposed to be packing lunch. And they, instead of going, Mom, no sandwich bags, right? They start to go look around and see if they can find something else, right? Like wash out a bag they just threw out from yesterday. That's not that dirty. Using a grocery bag instead, finding a Tupperware, like going through those critical thinking kind of problem solving steps. That's also another sign you're on the right track. That means that they're engaged and they feel capable and empowered to innovate and be creative, and they're probably a little bit more familiar or even kind of masters of their environment. Like they know where things are and how they work and what their options are. And that means you've taken the time, what Jane Nelson from Positive Discipline would say, you've taken time out for training. You've given them the opportunity to watch you do it, to be oriented to their environment. You've shown them what's in these drawers. Maybe you've even, and this is really important, listen to this, okay? Pro tip here, thought out loud in front of them the way that you hope they would think for themselves. So maybe they've seen you go, oh, shoot, I think we're out of sandwich bags, or we're out of something, right? I wonder what else we could use that's really similar. Let me check around the kitchen and see what we can find. And they've heard you problem solve out loud and think out loud. Well, kids internalize what we show them, sometimes 10, but up to 100 times more than what we tell them. Why don't you go see if you can find something else in the kitchen? Has a very different impact than if you've actually modeled it and thought out loud in front of them. That goes for a lot of things too. It's not just tactical things. It's also self-management. Like, oh, I'm frustrated right now, right? Like self-emotion coaching. I wonder what I could do. Maybe I need to take a little break and think about something, do something else and come back, right? That could be the other piece, right? Emotion coaching. To be able to talk yourself through a problem is another thing that can help you see that your kids are on track. I had a student, gosh, so many students who would come into my classroom. Where I teach them for 3 years in a 6 to 9 Montessori classroom. And they would come in the first, couple months just in that orientation phase. But if by 10 weeks, I could see them move through the environment, get the things they need, go to the pencil thing and there's no pencils left. And instead of like shouting for me or giving up or running to me, running to a teacher, they knew that they could check like one other spot, ask a peer what for an idea, and then even just kind of think through what else could I use instead of a pencil, and then eventually maybe come around to saying to me, Vanessa, I think we don't have enough pencils in the pencil box. Was amazing. Like you could see that kind of inner world growing and developing. That's another sign that you're on the right track. And then I'd say, last but not least, they start to ask better quality questions about things. So instead of, who took the last pencil, right? In that case, it'd be like, I wonder why we keep running out of pencils, right? Getting inquisitive and even feeling like they're actually have like a personal connection to this problem and a personal investment in fixing it. And then also even extending that beyond themselves to the community. Like, wouldn't it be nice if none of us had to look for a pencil and there's always a pencil there? Like, what would that take? Like, and then they start to problem solve. Well, let's make sure there's at least the number of pencils as there are kids. Or maybe another is, we need to clean up the floors better because a lot of pencils are rolling under shelves and we're losing them, right? Like, and they start to really get engaged and ask better questions. That's another sign you're on the right track. And there's all these processes you can put in place, like the thinking out loud, that can lead to more of this critical thinking, actually asking for their input on things. I went and visited one of my clients that was in one of my first cohorts in the Family Foundation's immersion, and they were just lovely. And I was going to actually pick up some Christmas gifts because they make these beautiful salves for like bug bites that are like natural and kid friendly. And her two children were home, and it was such a treat because I had a chance to connect with them. And at first, it was kind of like, oh, new person, I'm not sure, right? She was holding her mom's leg. But then I just kept talking to her mom a bit and would just throw her a little question here and there. And we ended up having like a 45-minute conversation, her daughter and I, and then her brother, or her older son came in, both of them under 10, came in, and then we are having this big dialogue. And I was even asking her for recommendations. I was like, I'm thinking about this gift for this person. What do you think? And she's like, well, I know, and she was rising to the occasion. And her mom turned to me and said, this is the most they've ever talked to an adult, like that they don't already know very well. And she goes, maybe it's because you actually treat them like people. And that just really struck me. And I realized that it's true. It took me a while to figure out how to engage like a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old in a conversation that was developmentally appropriate, where I wasn't talking down to them or talking over them, right? And a lot of it had to do with getting into their world a bit, asking them a few questions. And so there's another sign you can have that you're on the right track with your kids, is that you do have this like easy conversational flow at least once a day. It doesn't have to be right at pickup. It doesn't have to be on the spot. But at some point in the day, you have this way that you're really understanding each other and really connecting, and you can feel it. And they want to be with you. They want to keep having this connection, and they show an interest in you too, right? That's another sign, and that's at any age, right? But especially once they hit late toddler years, you want to start having that experience with them. And coming back to the first principle, getting into their world and attuning to their emotional and physical needs, as I would add, is one of the fastest way to get in there. So checking in about hunger, checking in about their emotions like anger, loneliness, tiredness. These are things I covered in my second episode of the Empowered Parent podcast, the Calm Empowered Parent podcast, because of how crucial it is for us to show concern and care for their basic needs. And have that be the foundation, like I'm here and I'm tuning into you and I'm making sure you've got what you need. Yeah. So a lot of thoughts there packed in. Hopefully there's a piece or a gem there that stood out to you. This is a great time to go ahead and write a comment in the chat if you're on Zoom, or in the Facebook group in the comments below the live stream. If you're on YouTube, in the comments section of the live. And also feel free to come on to the calmempoweredparent.com and submit a question if you've been finding this interesting and valuable. You can also submit your own question, and you can also come on to these live sessions. We're doing them on most fourth Mondays of the month at noon Pacific, on YouTube at the Calm Empowered Parent, on Facebook at the Raising Our Resilience Parent Group, and also on Zoom. And you need to go ahead and sign up for our newsletter to get the Zoom information, which you can also do at thecalmempoweredparent.com. Okay, we have a few more questions. Let's keep them rolling. And that means you, Gianni, since you're here live, you can ask a question in the chat, and I'll be keeping an eye out for that. He says, great reminder to think out loud in front of our kids. I agree, Gianni. And yeah, it's one of those things that we can absolutely forget to do. So I'm glad you're finding it like a good reminder, like it's putting it in your mind to practice that more often. And by the way, I want to give a shout out to Gianni as someone who sent an email to me sharing some anecdotes of what has been working for him lately, and even share that he's listened to all of the Raising Our Resilience YouTube channel videos, which is so impressive. There's over 100, I believe. Oof. Way to go, Gianni. What a student. All right. So we have a couple more questions. How can we manage sibling rivalry calmly and set routines that work for everyone in the family? Oh, I like this one so much. So we also dedicate 2 months of our year-long program. It's a module that we do twice about sibling rivalry, conflict resolution skills, and repair. Like basically what to do when we disagree, what to do when we're not getting what we need from somebody or something, what to do when we're frustrated and emotions are running high in an interaction, what to do when we've established our boundaries and those boundaries aren't being respected. These are all things we cover. And there are some particular tools that I found be incredibly effective for kids, and so much so that they end up wanting to use them themselves without our help, and then even want to teach others. To me, that's always a sign like that not only have I helped these kids get to mastery level, but there's enough sort of intrinsic motivation and value in the tools for them to actually share with others. So what I would start with sibling rivalry is to make sure that they have a way of identifying when they need to like kind of go to their corners and kind of call it quits on this conversation, this interaction, and take some space. So help them like notice when things are starting to go too far. And that's going to be different for every sibling pair and every age. At teenage years, if they start to resort to name calling, that might be your flag, right? But, in toddlers and preschoolers, it might be when things start to get physical and their cheeks start to get red and their fists are getting really tight and everything in between. So, because they're about to start using their hands and their feet, right, instead of their words. So having that like awareness around their emotional reaction to the conflict and when it's time to take a break, and what I call using Dr. Daniel Siegel's brain in the palm of the hand model, to put their lids back on, and you choose a coping tool before they return. So like they're escalating, their lids are coming off. And then finally one person's like, I need to go calm down, or I need a break. Right. And then say, let's try again later. Right. And then they go and they put their lid back on, and that gives hopefully the person that didn't think of that first to also get the cue of, right, I need to go regulate myself too before we can come back. This, by the way, is a really useful skill for adults. If you have not yet mastered the skill of self-awareness around when your emotions are running too high and it's actually better to take a break from a conversation. And, in a lot of marriage and family therapy and in a lot of brain research has determined that 20 minutes to cool down is usually, on average, a pretty good amount to be able to at least get your brain working in integrated, smooth fashion again, so that you have access to things like your memories and your and some perspective on like time and consequence and other things that are not available or very hard to reach when your lid's off, when you're flooded, for example. So coming back to the question about siblings, having an ability and also a way for whoever is assisting them, whatever caregiver, whether that's a teacher, a nanny, a parent, yourself, the person who asked this question, having a way to intervene that you've agreed upon ahead of time. hey, when I see the two of you getting to that place and you're not, and I'm first, I'm going to just, check in. Hey, are we still, like, this is my favorite one. Hey, are we still having fun? Everybody okay? Right. And then the agreement would be that if I can read that things are getting too far or lids are about to pop all the way off, I have a way of getting involved. And that can look like something nonverbal. I've done this with two kids who were in a love-hate relationship where they couldn't stay away from each other. And then they would often, when they were together, they would fight and at the very least highly distract each other because they were a little obsessive about their friendship. There have been many pairs like this over my 15 years of teaching. And I ended up coming up with a hand signal that worked for several of them, which I would just say their names, get their attention, right? Make sure I have their full attention. And I'll go like this, which just meant time to take a break, right? It was so much better than coming over and, because we had reached that point. But if you're not there yet, please don't skip the steps of meaningfully involving yourself a few times before you then say, I have the authority to separate you two and say it's time to take a break. So how can you meaningfully involve yourself? You can go in there and you can physically make some space between two kids who are about to go at it. That's important. Just put your body in between them and say, hey, friends, what's happening, right? Is everybody okay, right? Is everybody still having fun? Another thing you can do to meaningfully involve yourself could be to ask one of them to come to you and just ask them to kind of basically report what's happening, and then ask how they feel about it and why they feel that way. So you're like building towards, by the way, an I statement, which I'll cover in the 5th episode of the Calm Empowered Parent podcast, where I'll be talking about ways of using a feelings chart. I'll also go over the I statement, so you can look forward to that. But so you're building towards this, being able to calm down, like have the awareness that they need to take the space to cool their jets enough to be able to come back meaningfully. And one of the ways you can do that is bringing a kid over and interviewing them a bit around like what happened and, oh, like how did that feel and why did it feel that way? And then also maybe is there something that you think you need right now? Like what's your ask that might come after an I statement? And that's like the building blocks of helping the kids be able to solve their problems. Now for teenagers and middle schoolers, like kids and tweens and teens, they're a little bit past just saying use an I statement or, hey, it's like maybe you should take a break. Oftentimes they need you to get it and like really get it. Like sometimes just say, tell me more. What else sucks about this? What else is painful about this? What else did they do that annoys you? How long has this been going on? And like let them like get their full story out before you make any suggestions. Top tip, okay, as they get older. And really that starts around age 9, because I've definitely stepped in it with a 9-year-old by giving suggestions too quickly and then like eye rolling at me. Oh, you don't get it. So coming back to the making sure that you get it part, you might ask for them to really share with you. And I recently just got a text from one of my clients who had been feeling like this aggravation coming from her son, and really the conflict was between the two of them. But he was kind of like having this generalized like kind of like conflict with life, like nothing was feeling quite right because and they were in this big life transition, so understandably he had a lot on his chest. And I said, do this, try this, set a timer for like as long as you think you can handle. So I think she ended up doing 5 to 10 minutes, something like that. And she just let him have a cathartic, like share. Okay, what else is bothering you? What else, right? And like in my coaching world, where I learned this from my business coach, Sage Levine, who's based in California, Santa Cruz, California. If you want to look her up, Sage Levine. She helped us do this thing called spring cleaning that helps us to kind of clear our gunk out, clear our stuff out before we are then, so we can become more emotionally available for our work and our clients. So it's kind of like grooming us to be better coaches and, just better humans, really. And more capacity building. And spring cleaning, right? Like what else you got, right? And with the older kids, you got to let them really just say their piece, and you might hear things you don't like they're being really judgmental, or they're playing the victim role, or they're blowing this out of proportion and it doesn't match, right? Like they're exaggerating, or they're using this superlatives like always, never, or like the best, the worst, right? Let them do it. Let them share it. Let them get it out. and then see if like you can help them put that lid on and get to like the core thing that they want to express and the core thing that they need from the situation or in this moment. Okay. When you do that and you do this groundwork, kids get along better. Okay. They do. And I've seen it times 24 kids at a time in a classroom, sometimes 36, even 48 children. You got to put those basic things in place, and that's what the kids can really benefit from and build off of. And then you can also establish a conflict resolution process, and that can include effective apologies, running through problem solving suggestions, making agreement for now, and then checking in about how that agreement's going. So there is a restorative process, and sometimes there can be like a great need for repair and even growth, right? Like letting go of a bad habit of always blaming each other when something goes wrong as siblings, for example, and moving towards something that's more fair and accurate, more truthful. Okay. So lots of ideas in there. Let me know what stood out. Like I said, in the comments, the chat, feel free to share. It's always valuable for us to hear your takeaways. And also it's great for you because you have a sense of what you're actually walking away with, and you're more likely to remember and do the thing that you share to the group. All right, on to our next question. Oh, I just love these questions. Okay, here we go. This is from Brittany Williams. Brittany asks, how do we get through to that teenage brain and get on the same page as a family? Well, something you have to understand, everybody, about the teenage brain is that it is going through an incredible amount of reorganization. And so in terms of like moodiness and kids having less capacity, maybe even being a little foggy brained, where they're like, they seem spaced out, maybe more forgetful, more clumsy, etc. That's kind of what we're talking about with teenage brain. This is what I'm assuming here from the question. If it's something else, please let me know. Okay, Brittany. Coming back to the idea though of teenage brain, there's a lot of compassion you need to build in. And this is a good time for us to get to know the core emotions really well, because there's nothing more that an emotion wants than to be seen, heard, and felt. And if you don't see, hear, and feel it, then they tend to get bigger and or louder, or cause harm because you're holding tension and you're maybe even cutting yourself off from support systems that you don't feel have the capacity or ready to process your emotion with you. I remember in my teenage years feeling very rebellious, but like also from a root of like feeling isolated a bit from the support system that I used to be able to rely on more as a younger kid. And I think it's because the expectations were starting to exceed my ability to meet them. And I was getting overwhelmed, and I was starting to have like chronic stress. And with that was a lot of internalized frustration and anger and sadness and fear. And I don't blame my parents for this, but because they were raised with even more severe models of this, but they had a difficult time processing their emotions. Different flavors for different parents. One of them was sad and depressed a lot. The other one had a hot temper, was angry a lot. The other one was really fearful and controlling a lot. So I didn't really have a strong, like well-rounded model of a person who could handle all their full range of the core emotions. And so it was actually really helpful even as an adult to make sense of, and this might be helpful for you right now, to hear the core messages that emotions have for us. So with mad, angry, frustration, irritation, all the things that kind of fall under the anger umbrella, oftentimes there's something you want, but the situation or the person isn't giving it to you. And that can be like big, like society isn't giving it to you and there's an injustice, or it could be small, like this key won't open this door and it usually does. And, or someone put my keys somewhere and I can't find them, right? From like small grievances to the big ones. Anger can give us some guidance around something's not right and something needs action. There needs to be some action taken, and I need others to pay attention to this too. So anger is not a negative emotion. It's a difficult emotion. It can be painful and it can do harm if not directed properly. but it's also useful. And I think knowing that core message of I know what I want, and the situation or person or thing isn't giving it to me, and that's hard, helps us to be able to empathize with the teenagers and help them process what they're experiencing. So if they say, "Oh, I can't stand that movie theater," and you're like, "Well, what's going on?" They're like, "Well, there's all these kids there, and they're like, in little circles, and they're laughing, and it's so loud," and you're like, "Hmm." So what is going on here is what I want to know, right? Like this like seems a little bit of a big feeling for just seeing other kids having a good time, right? So I'd say, well, how did it go with your friends when you were there? Because it sounds like there was something you might have wanted that was missing. And like, was it just that it was too loud and you couldn't hear the movie, or was there anything else going on? And so then you start to explore the nuances of their experience, right? And then at some point you're like, it makes sense that you were really irritated because you really cared about the film and a bunch of people didn't, and you didn't get to hear all of it, and you paid money for it. And yeah, you and your best friend were looking forward to it and didn't get to enjoy it. The other thing that might have come up too, that was like, well, it looks like they're having a lot of fun. And right now you and your best friend are kind of fighting. And so you were surrounded by all these people having a good time and something that you want to have. And you were not only not able to hear the movie, but you weren't really enjoying the time with your friend. And then you were too irritated to really be friendly with them. And gosh, what a tough situation. When you bring in that level of empathy and emotions for the teenage brain, it can be really helpful not only to stay connected with you and feel on the same team, but help them process, help them make sense of it. The other thing I learned from Dr. Lisa D'Amour, who is the author of a lot of great books about girls and adolescents, but particularly she just published The Emotional Lives of Teenagers, and I recommend it to all of my clients who have kids who are starting to show signs of puberty or about to head into that time. So 9, 10, 11. It's a great time to read it. And if your kids are older than that, read it too. If you have adult children, you want to make sense of what happened or what your teenage years were like, read it as well. But one of the examples in the book that I just love is when she talks about how kids will have this sort of disproportionate reaction, but if we give them the opportunity to share it, oftentimes what it'll do is there'll be all this drama of like, oh, my friend did this and the other friend did that, and then the teacher said this, and at times there's actually a real grievance that needs to be addressed, like, don't get me wrong, but other times you're literally just like a garbage disposal. So she said garbage can or garbage disposal, where they're like dumping out the stuff, you catch it, you're like the garbage catcher. My one of my friends calls it the vomit catcher for each other. We're just having to like let it all out. So you're the catcher of this stuff, and then they go off into their day, and you're like thinking about it all day, like, oh my gosh, I hope it goes okay with their friend, and hope that teacher is like, like handling the situation better or whatever. And then you pick them up and you go, so how did it go? And they're like, what are you talking about? Well, yeah, with your teacher and your like class and with your friend, like, oh, it was fine, and they're like, they've moved on. What they really needed was just to dump it. They need to dump it. So you have to be careful with teenagers too, to like, you empathize and you connect, but you don't like necessarily hold on, because their emotional states, their dramas, their concerns can really change from like hour to hour, day to day, week by week. And so the main job you have is to be present, empathize, and keep up as best as you can, and not take it personally when they dump their stuff in your direction and start to take it out on you. Still hold your boundaries around what you need. Let them know that it's not okay to talk to you a certain way, and etc. They need that. They need a reasonable response from the environment, which means that you're not a doormat and you don't walk on eggshells, but also give them a lot more, like a wider berth for having feelings, expressing them, and making sense of them. So that's what I've got for you. The last question is, it's really deeply personal, and so it almost didn't make it into this ask Vanessa anything, but I feel like the people who made it to the very end can be entrusted with this question, and we can have a chance to support each other. And if you have suggestions, please also put them into the chat, especially the Facebook group if you're in it, for Isabela, because she asks, she just moved to a new country and a new home with a new school system with her 3 daughters as a single parent. And together they're just journeying through so many changes and challenges. I actually had a chance to meet with Isabela for a one-on-one. And if you have not yet taken advantage of our complimentary 30-minute coaching session, they are available for folks who, engage in our community. And so by coming to Ask Vanessa Anything, making it to the end, if you have not yet signed up for one of these, you're welcome to pop on my calendar if we haven't met in the last 6 months. It's also a way to see if it's a fit for us to work together and for you to have a chance to take a parenting strengths quiz and see what those results are and how I can support you with boosting your strengths and building off your strengths for your challenges. So please feel free to hop on my calendar and you'll be sent a link to the quiz as well. If you just want to take the quiz, I'll also put that link into the Facebook group so you can have a chance to check that out. And if you go to my website, you can also find it at thecalmempoweredparent.com if you go to the main site, which you can also get to from vanessacallahan.com. Just my name spelled out.com. Okay, so this question: how do I help the kids manage their strong and intense feelings during this period of transition? So last tip, what I was able to say to Isabela during our session is that she's got to take care of herself first. That is so much on her plate. And so what we ended up talking through more was like, how is she going to find and establish childcare so that she had more bandwidth? What community programs and or like hubs could she start getting tapped into so she could have a sense of community where she in her new home, and so on. And so if you are just in that state of total overwhelm, make sure you really are doing that oxygen mask first thing. Because, one thing somebody said recently that I really appreciated is, it's one of my clients who's been working with me for several years. She said, how can we possibly take care of others if we aren't taking care of ourselves? And you can kind of fake it for a while, but you don't usually end up making it unless you actually do take care of yourself too. So full permission to take care of yourselves in the next weeks. And we'll be back with the Calm Empowered Parent podcast, fourth episode on Monday, and then fifth episode the following Monday, sixth episode the Monday after that, and then we'll be back for another Ask Vanessa Anything the fourth Monday in April. And I look forward to it. Lots of love to each of you. Got to go, but hopefully this has been helpful to you. Drop comments, put some love in the chat. Always love to hear from folks. And if you're listening on YouTube, those likes and subscribes go a long way to get our message and our resources out to other parents. So do us a solid if you're stoked on this and enjoyed it. Please, like, follow, subscribe wherever you're listening to this, and we'd really appreciate it. All right, lots of love. Until next time, bye for now.